The morning alarm echoed through the dormitory corridors of the Galactic Defense Academy like the cry of some mechanical beast. Cadet Elena Vasquez rolled out of her narrow bunk with practiced silence, her movements careful not to disturb the other cadets who shared her section. At 19, she had learned the art of invisibility within these steel walls. The academy floated in the void between three star systems, a massive structure that housed over 50,000 beings from across the galaxy. Humans made up barely 3% of the student body, their small numbers often overlooked among the towering Craxi warriors, the brilliant vegan tacticians, and the lightning-fast Zephyrian pilots. Most species viewed humanity as the newest addition to the galactic community. Young, inexperienced, and lacking the natural advantages that other races possessed. Elena pulled on her standard-issue uniform, the gray fabric hanging loose on her small frame. At 5 feet 4 inches, she was considered short even by human standards, and among her alien classmates, she appeared almost childlike. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her brown eyes held a quiet intensity that few bothered to notice. She had been at the academy for 2 years now, and in that time, she had become background noise. Her grades were solid, but not spectacular. Her physical performance met requirements without exceeding them. Her tactical scores placed her in the middle of her class. By every measurable standard, Elena Vasquez was perfectly average. But averageness, she had learned, was its own kind of camouflage. The mess hall buzzed with the typical morning chaos. Craxi cadets dominated the center tables, their massive forms requiring specially reinforced seating. Their deep voices boomed across the room as they discussed combat techniques and shared stories of their homeworld's endless wars. The vegans clustered in smaller groups, their pale blue skin glowing softly as they engaged in rapid-fire conversations about theoretical physics and military strategy. Elena took her usual seat at the far corner, next to the observation windows that showed the starfield beyond. She preferred the quiet here, where she could eat her synthesized protein and watch the distant ships that occasionally passed the academy. A few other human cadets sat nearby, but they rarely acknowledged each other. Humans at the academy had learned to keep their heads down. "Look at the little mouse," a voice rumbled from behind her. Elena didn't turn around, but she recognized the speaker, Draktar, a Craxi cadet who stood nearly 8 feet tall and weighed close to 400 pounds. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived, and their culture valued physical prowess above all else. "She's so small. I'm not sure she could even carry a standard plasma rifle," another Craxi voice added, followed by deep laughter that sounded like boulders grinding together. Elena continued eating, her expression unchanged. She had heard worse over the past 2 years. The Craxi weren't necessarily cruel. They simply couldn't understand how a species as physically weak as humanity had managed to develop spaceflight, let alone earn a place in the Galactic Defense Force. To them, Elena represented everything wrong with the galaxy's new recruitment policies. A few tables away, a group of vegan cadets was engaged in a heated discussion about the upcoming tactical simulation exercises. Elena listened with half an ear while she finished her meal. The vegans were brilliant strategists, their minds capable of processing multiple scenarios simultaneously. They spoke in rapid, clipped sentences, their voices carrying the confident tone of beings who had never doubted their intellectual superiority. "The humans will likely be eliminated in the first phase," one of them was saying, his blue-white skin pulsing slightly with excitement. "Their reaction times are simply too slow for modern combat scenarios. It's unfortunate that Academy policy requires their inclusion in mixed-species units." Elena had heard this argument before. The Academy's integration protocols meant that tactical exercises often included mixed teams, forcing different species to work together. Most cadets viewed this as an unnecessary complication that dragged down overall performance. The humans, lacking the physical advantages of the Craxi or the mental processing speed of the vegans, were often seen as the weak link. As she stood to clear her tray, Elena caught sight of herself in the polished metal surface of a disposal unit. Her reflection looked back at her. Unremarkable, quiet, easily dismissed. She had cultivated this image carefully, understanding that visibility often brought unwanted attention at the academy. Better to blend into the background and observe. The morning's classes followed the usual pattern. Galactic history was taught by a vegan professor who spoke too quickly and seemed irritated when students asked for clarification. Elena took careful notes, her handwriting neat and precise. She had learned early on that professors rarely called on the quiet human in the back row, which suited her perfectly. Combat theory was more challenging. The Craxi instructor, Commander Vex High, believed in learning through experience rather than lecture. His classroom was a modified training bay where theoretical scenarios became practical exercises. Today's lesson focused on small unit tactics in hostile environments. Survival in combat depends on understanding your own capabilities and limitations, Commander Vex High announced, his massive frame moving with surprising grace as he paced before the assembled cadets. Each species brings different strengths to the battlefield. The Craxi provide heavy assault capabilities. The vegans offer tactical analysis and strategic planning. The Zephyrians deliver speed and reconnaissance. He paused, his predatory gaze sweeping across the room. And the humans? Several cadets chuckled, the sound echoing off the metal walls. The humans are still finding their place in this new galaxy. Elena felt the familiar flush of embarrassment but kept her expression neutral. She had long ago stopped expecting fair treatment from the Academy's instructors. Most of them had been serving in the Galactic Defense Force since before humanity had even developed interstellar travel. To them, humans were an unknown quantity at best, a liability at worst. The practical exercise that followed reinforced this perception. Cadets were divided into mixed species teams and tasked with navigating a complex obstacle course while under simulated enemy fire. Elena found herself assigned to a team led by Zarak, a vegan cadet known for her aggressive tactics and impatience with slower team members. "Stay in the rear and try not to get in the way," Zarak told Elena as they prepared to enter the course. The other team members, two Craxi and another vegan, nodded in agreement. Elena simply adjusted her equipment and took her assigned position. The course was brutal. Holographic enemies appeared and disappeared with lightning speed, forcing the team to adapt quickly to changing threats. The Craxi charged forward with plasma rifles blazing, their thick hides absorbing the stun bolts from the training weapons. The vegans calculated angles and cover positions with mathematical precision, calling out tactical adjustments in their rapid-fire language. Elena followed at a distance, her smaller frame allowing her to move through spaces that the others couldn't access. She noticed things that the rest of the team missed. Secondary threats appearing in peripheral areas, subtle changes in the environment that might indicate hidden dangers, patterns in the enemy fire that suggested coordinated attacks. But when she tried to communicate these observations, her teammates were too focused on their own roles to listen. The exercise ended with their team placing 3rd out of 8, a respectable showing that earned grudging approval from Commander Vex High. "Adequate performance," he announced as the teams gathered for debriefing. The Craxi demonstrated proper aggressive tactics. The vegans showed good analytical skills. The humans managed to avoid becoming casualties. Elena felt the sting of the backhanded compliment, but said nothing. This was how it always went at the Academy. She was evaluated not on her contributions but on her ability to stay out of the way. The afternoon brought advanced weapon systems, taught by a human instructor, Colonel Sarah Chen, one of the few human faculty members at the Academy. Elena appreciated these classes not just for the subject matter but for the rare experience of being taught by someone who understood human capabilities and limitations without dismissing them entirely. Colonel Chen was a veteran of the early contact wars, when humanity had first encountered hostile alien species during their expansion into the galaxy. She was small and wiry, with gray-streaked hair and scars that told stories of real combat experience. Unlike many Academy instructors who had spent their careers in theoretical roles, Chen had seen actual warfare. "Today we're discussing adaptive tactics," Colonel Chen announced as the class settled into their seats. "The ability to modify your approach based on changing circumstances is often more valuable than raw firepower or processing speed." She activated the room's holographic display, showing footage from various historical battles. Consider the Battle of Kepler Station. A joint human-alien force faced an enemy with superior numbers and technology. Victory came not from matching the enemy's strengths, but from identifying and exploiting their weaknesses. Elena leaned forward, studying the tactical display with interest. She had read about this battle in her personal study time, fascinated by the unconventional strategies that had led to an unlikely victory. Notice how the human units adapted their tactics in real time, Colonel Chen continued. They used the environment, improvised weapons, and employed deception to overcome opponents who should have defeated them easily. A Craxi cadet raised his massive hand. Respectfully, Colonel. Those tactics worked only because the enemy underestimated human unpredictability. Against a properly prepared opponent, such methods would fail. Colonel Chen smiled, the expression carrying both humor and warning. That's an interesting assumption, Cadet Mortek. Tell me, how does one properly prepare for an unpredictable opponent? The question hung in the air, and Elena saw several cadets shift uncomfortably. The implication was clear. If humans were truly unpredictable, then preparing for them might be impossible. It was a subtle defense of human capabilities, but one that many cadets would interpret as confirmation of their belief that humans were too chaotic for proper military service. After class, Elena remained behind to review her notes. Colonel Chen approached her desk, moving with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command. Cadet Vasquez, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being heard. I've been reviewing your academic performance. Your grades are solid across all subjects. Elena looked up, uncertain where this conversation was heading. Thank you, ma'am. However, I notice that you rarely participate in class discussions. Do you have thoughts on today's lecture? The question caught Elena off guard. Most instructors barely acknowledged her presence, let alone sought her opinions. I found the tactical adaptations interesting, ma'am. The way the human units used environmental factors to offset their disadvantages showed creative thinking. Colonel Chen nodded. Go on. Well, the enemy had superior technology and numbers, but they were operating from assumptions about human behavior based on other species they had encountered. When those assumptions proved incorrect, they couldn't adjust quickly enough to maintain their advantage. And what does that suggest about the nature of tactical preparation? Elena hesitated, aware that her answer might be seen as criticism of established academy doctrine. That rigid planning has vulnerabilities that flexibility can exploit. If you prepare for every scenario you can imagine, you might miss the one scenario you can't imagine. Colonel Chen's smile broadened. Exactly. Remember that insight. Cadet Vasquez. It may prove useful sooner than you think. The colonel left, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts. The conversation had been encouraging, but also puzzling. Colonel Chen's final comment suggested knowledge of something Elena wasn't aware of. Some upcoming challenge or opportunity. Evening brought the usual routine of study hall and equipment maintenance. Elena spent time in the Academy's library, a vast digital repository containing military knowledge from across the galaxy. She had developed a habit of studying not just required materials but also historical conflicts, technical manuals, and theoretical papers that caught her interest. Tonight, she found herself reading about asymmetric warfare. Conflicts where opposing forces had dramatically different capabilities and resources. The human-alien conflicts of the early contact period featured prominently in these studies, showing how human forces had often prevailed against superior opponents through unconventional tactics and adaptive strategies. As she read, Elena became aware of voices from a nearby study area. A group of senior cadets was discussing the upcoming war games, a massive, academy-wide exercise that occurred once each academic year. The exercise pitted teams of cadets against each other in complex scenarios designed to test everything they had learned. This year's format is different, one voice was saying. Elena recognized it as belonging to Kethra, a Zephyrian cadet known for his exceptional piloting skills. Instead of single-species teams, they're using completely mixed groups with random assignments. Random assignments? Another voice? This one belonging to a vegan cadet? That seems inefficient. How can proper strategy be developed without knowing team composition in advance? That's exactly the point, Kethra replied. Real combat doesn't always allow for optimal team configuration. The exercise is designed to test adaptability and improvisation. Elena felt a chill of anticipation. Random team assignments meant that species-based prejudices would be temporarily set aside in favor of practical necessity. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she might have a chance to demonstrate her capabilities without the burden of preconceptions about human limitations. She continued listening as the senior cadets discussed the exercise parameters. The war games would last 3 days, with teams competing in a series of escalating challenges, combat simulations, tactical puzzles, resource management scenarios, and survival exercises would test every aspect of military training. The winning team would receive significant honors and preferential assignment to advanced training programs. More importantly, the entire exercise would be recorded for analysis and training purposes. Every action would be documented, creating a permanent record of each cadet's performance under pressure. Elena closed her study materials and made her way back to the dormitory. As she walked through the academy's corridors, she passed groups of cadets engaged in animated discussions about the upcoming exercise. The excitement was palpable. For many, this would be their first chance to prove themselves in realistic combat scenarios. But Elena felt something different as she prepared for sleep. For 2 years, she had been content to remain invisible, to meet requirements without attracting attention. The war games would change that. In a randomly assigned team, her worth would be determined not by species-based expectations but by actual performance. As she lay in her bunk, listening to the quiet sounds of the dormitory around her, Elena found herself thinking about Colonel Chen's parting words. The instructor had seemed to know something about what was coming, and her advice about remembering the importance of flexibility suggested that the war games might test more than just conventional military skills. The academy's night cycle dimmed the lights, but Elena remained awake, her mind racing with possibilities. Somewhere in the academy's administrative systems, algorithms were working to create team assignments that would challenge every cadet's preconceptions about their own capabilities and those of their teammates. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Elena Vasquez felt the stirring of something that had been dormant for too long. The desire not just to succeed, but to excel. The quiet cadet who had spent 2 years being dismissed by her peers was about to discover what she was truly capable of when the galaxy's most prestigious military academy stopped underestimating her. The war games would begin in just 3 days, and Elena had the distinct feeling that everything was about to change. The assignment board flickered to life at precisely 0600 hours, displaying team compositions for the academy's annual war games. Elena stood among hundreds of other cadets in the main assembly hall, watching as names appeared alongside randomly generated group numbers. The air hummed with nervous energy as beings from dozens of species learned who they would be fighting alongside. Team 7 materialized on the display, and Elena felt her stomach tighten as she read the names. Karnvex, a massive Kraxi warrior, whose reputation for aggressive tactics was legendary among the cadets. Zilani, a vegan strategic analyst whose cold calculating mind had never encountered a problem she couldn't solve mathematically. Thex, a Zephyrian pilot whose reflexes were so fast that other cadets claimed he could dodge his own shadow. And finally, herself, the small human who most of her teammates probably couldn't even pick out of a crowd. Around her, other cadets were already forming groups and discussing strategy. Elena watched as her designated teammates found each other through the crowd, their expressions ranging from excitement to concern as they realized their team composition included a human. Karnvex spotted her first, his predatory eyes scanning the assembly until they landed on her small frame. At nearly 8 feet tall, he towered over everyone around him, his battle-scarred hide telling stories of countless training exercises and real combat during his species' endless territorial wars. "You are the human," he said as Elena approached, his voice carrying the deep rumble that characterized his species. It wasn't quite a question, more like a statement of disappointed fact. "Elena Vasquez," she replied, offering a slight nod of acknowledgement. "I'm looking forward to working with you." Zilani materialized beside them with the fluid grace typical of her people. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow in the assembly hall's lighting, and her large black eyes studied Elena with clinical precision. According to Academy records, Human reaction times average 0.24 seconds compared to our 0.09 seconds. Additionally, your species lacks the enhanced strength modifications that would allow you to carry standard heavy weapons. Before Elena could respond, Thex appeared in a blur of motion that made her eyes water. Zephyrians moved so quickly that they often seemed to teleport short distances. His insectoid features were difficult for humans to read, but his posture suggested skepticism about their team's chances. Random assignments are inefficient. Thex clicked, his translated words coming through the universal communicator with mechanical precision. Our statistical probability of success has decreased by 23.7% due to human inclusion. Elena had experienced this type of reception before, but never with stakes this high. The war games would determine advanced placement opportunities and career trajectories within the Galactic Defense Force. Her teammates were clearly viewing her as a liability that would drag down their performance. Perhaps we should focus on working with what we have, Elena suggested, keeping her voice level and professional. The scenarios are designed to test adaptability as much as individual capabilities. Karnavex snorted, a sound like steam escaping from a damaged reactor. Adaptability will not compensate for fundamental physical limitations. In combat, the weak become casualties while the strong achieve objectives. The team briefing area was a chaos of voices and languages as 43 teams received their initial mission parameters. Elena found herself pushed to the edge of their group circle, listening as her teammates discussed strategy without significant input from her. The Academy's holographic displays showed their first challenge. A complex urban warfare scenario, set in a simulated city environment. Their objective was straightforward in concept but nightmarish in execution. They needed to infiltrate a heavily defended compound, retrieve critical intelligence, and extract to a designated safe zone, while avoiding or eliminating enemy forces. The catch was that the defenders would be senior cadets and academy instructors using advanced weapons and equipment. Standard assault approach, Karnavex declared. Studying the tactical display with the confidence of someone whose species had been perfecting warfare for millennia. Frontal attack with overwhelming force to break through their defenses. Zilani's skin pulsed slightly as she processed multiple scenarios simultaneously. Negative. Defender advantage in prepared positions makes frontal assault statistically unfavorable. Recommend flanking maneuver with coordinated timing. Thex's translation device clicked rapidly as he spoke. Speed advantage allows for reconnaissance and hit-and-run tactics. Identify weak points through rapid probing attacks. Elena listened to their discussion while studying the mission parameters more carefully. Something about the scenario felt familiar, triggering memories of historical battles she had studied in her personal research time. The setup reminded her of several conflicts where conventional approaches had failed against prepared defenders. "What if we're thinking about this wrong?" she said quietly. The conversation stopped, and 3 pairs of alien eyes focused on her with expressions ranging from curiosity to irritation. "Explain," Zilani said, her scientific mind apparently willing to consider input from any source. Elena activated her personal data pad and projected a smaller version of the tactical display. "Look at the timeline. We have 6 hours to complete the mission, but most teams will probably attempt it within the first 2 hours, while everyone's fresh and alert." She traced routes on the display with her finger. "The defenders are expecting multiple assault attempts early on. They'll be at peak readiness, with all their sensors active and weapon systems online. By hour 4 or 5, they'll be dealing with fatigue and reduced vigilance." Karnavex rumbled disapprovingly. "Waiting shows weakness. Warriors attack when the opportunity presents itself." "But this isn't just about warrior courage," Elena continued, warming to her topic as she saw Zilani's eyes brighten with interest. "It's about maximizing probability of success. The scenario includes environmental factors that change over time. Lighting conditions, atmospheric effects, even simulated weather patterns." 7. She manipulated the display to show a time-lapse projection of the mission area. By hour 5, local atmospheric conditions will create natural concealment opportunities. The defenders will have been responding to attacks for hours, potentially depleting their energy reserves and creating patterns we can exploit. Thex's translation device processed this for several seconds before responding. Delayed assault carries risks. Other teams may achieve objectives before our attempt. Ephraim, only if they succeed, Elena replied. But if the early attempts fail, we'll have intelligence about defender capabilities and tactics that we can use to our advantage. Zelani's skin now pulsed with the rapid pattern that indicated intense mental activity. The human raises valid tactical considerations. Historical analysis supports the effectiveness of delayed assault tactics against prepared positions. Elena felt a small surge of satisfaction as her teammates began to seriously consider her suggestion. But Carnvex remained skeptical, his massive frame radiating disapproval. "Your species lacks the stomach for real combat," he growled. "This hiding and waiting is not the way of warriors." "Maybe not," Elena admitted, "but it might be the way of winners." The debate continued for another hour as they refined their approach. Eventually, they settled on a hybrid strategy that incorporated elements of Elena's delayed assault concept with more aggressive tactics favored by her teammates. It wasn't perfect, but it represented genuine collaboration rather than the dismissal she had expected. The mission began at noon, with teams deploying across the Academy's massive training complex. Elena followed her teammates through the initial staging area, noting how other teams immediately launched into action. Explosions and weapon fire could be heard almost immediately as the more aggressive teams engaged the defenders. Their team found a concealed observation position overlooking the target compound. For the next 4 hours, they watched as team after team attempted various assault strategies. Some tried Carnvex's preferred frontal attack approach. Others attempted Zelani's calculated flanking maneuvers. A few used Thex's speed-based hit-and-run tactics. Every single attempt failed. Elena made careful notes as she observed each assault, identifying patterns in the defender responses and noting how their tactics evolved to counter different approaches. The Academy instructors controlling the exercise were clearly experienced military professionals who had seen every standard tactical manual in existence. 17 teams eliminated, Zelani reported as they watched another group retreat under heavy fire. Success rate is currently 0% across all conventional approaches. Carnvex's earlier confidence had faded as he witnessed the systematic destruction of teams using tactics he would have favored. Their defenses are stronger than anticipated. Elena studied her notes and the updated tactical displays. "Actually, I think their defenses are exactly as strong as they need to be to stop the attacks they're expecting. But look at the patterns." She highlighted several areas on her datapad. The defenders are rotating their heavy weapons positions every 45 minutes. Their patrol routes follow predictable patterns based on responding to previous attacks. And their sensor coverage has blind spots that they're not adjusting because no one has tried to exploit them. Thex buzzed with what Elena had learned to recognize as Zephyrian excitement. "You observe what others miss. This is useful capability." As Hour 5 approached, Elena felt her nerves beginning to tighten. Everything depended on whether her analysis was correct, whether her teammates would trust her judgment when the critical moment arrived. She had spent 2 years being overlooked and dismissed, but now 3 alien beings were preparing to bet their academy careers on her tactical assessment. The atmospheric conditions shifted exactly as Elena had predicted, creating a perfect opportunity for concealed movement. She led her team through a route that avoided the main sensor arrays, moving slowly and carefully through areas where previous attacks had drawn defender attention elsewhere. "This is insane," Carnvex whispered as they approached the compound's perimeter. "We are crawling like insects instead of fighting like warriors." "Insects often survive where warriors die," Elena replied softly. Their entry point was a maintenance access that Elena had identified during her hours of observation. The Academy's designers had included it for scenario realism, but none of the previous teams had noticed it, because they had been focused on the more obvious tactical features. Inside the compound, Elena's predictions continued to prove accurate. The defenders had concentrated their remaining forces around the main approaches, leaving the interior more lightly guarded than it had been hours earlier. Her teammates followed her lead through a maze of corridors and chambers, moving with growing confidence as her unconventional approach proved effective. The intelligence package was located exactly where the mission briefing had indicated. But Elena suspected a trap. The previous teams had probably reached this point as well, only to trigger alarms or automated defenses that ended their attempts. "Wait," she whispered as Zelani moved toward the objective. "Let me check something." Elena pulled out her personal scanner and began examining the area around the intelligence package. Her teammates watched with growing impatience as precious seconds ticked away. "There," she said finally, highlighting something on her scanner display. "Motion sensor with a dead man switch. Grab the package, and the entire facility goes into lockdown mode." Zilani's skin pulsed with admiration. "How did you identify the specific sensor type?" "I didn't," Elena admitted. "But I noticed that every team got this far, and they all triggered something that ended their mission. Given the Academy's love of realistic scenarios, a dead man switch seemed likely." Thex was already moving, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to disable the sensor with surgical precision. Within moments, they had secured the intelligence package without triggering any alarms. The extraction phase should have been routine, but Elena felt a nagging sense that they were missing something. The scenario had been too easy once they had reached the objective. Academy exercises always included complications and unexpected challenges. Her suspicions proved correct when they reached the extraction point. The safe zone was occupied by a full squad of senior cadets, equipped with heavy weapons and acting as a final checkpoint. Previous teams had fought their way this far, only to be eliminated in the final minutes of their mission. "Ambush position," Carnvex observed unnecessarily. "They control all approaches to the extraction zone." Elena studied the tactical situation while her teammates prepared for what looked like an inevitable firefight. The final challenge was clearly designed to test teams under maximum pressure, but something about it felt wrong. The Academy's scenarios always included solutions, even if they weren't obvious. "What if we're not supposed to fight them?" she said suddenly. Her teammates stared at her as if she had suggested surrendering their weapons and walking naked into the ambush. "The mission parameters call for extraction to the safe zone," Zilani said slowly. "Elimination of hostile forces is authorized but not required." Elena nodded, her mind racing as she considered possibilities that her combat-focused teammates might have overlooked. "Right. We need to reach the safe zone. But we don't necessarily need to fight our way there. If you are need 3 say." She began examining their surroundings more carefully, looking for alternatives that previous teams might have missed. The extraction zone was located in a central courtyard, surrounded by buildings, with the ambush force positioned to control all the obvious approaches. But Elena had spent her life being overlooked and dismissed, which had taught her to notice things that others missed. Above the courtyard, a network of service conduits and maintenance walkways connected the surrounding buildings. They were clearly visible but positioned high enough that most species wouldn't consider them viable approach routes. "Can you climb?" she asked Thex, pointing toward the overhead network. The Zephyrian's compound eyes tracked upward, and his translation device clicked with rapid excitement. "Affirmative. Structural analysis indicates sufficient load capacity for individual infiltration." Elena pulled out her scanner again, studying the conduit network in detail. "There's an access point directly above the safe zone. If we could create a distraction to draw attention away from that approach." Carnvex finally understood where her logic was leading. Frontal assault as diversion, while aerial infiltration secures objective. This has tactical merit. The plan came together quickly once her teammates grasped the concept. Carnvex and Zilani would create a noisy distraction attack from the main approach, drawing the ambush force's attention. Meanwhile, Thex would use his speed and climbing ability to reach the overhead access point. Elena would provide tactical coordination and backup support. "What about the intelligence package?" Zilani asked. "Extraction requires delivery of mission objective." Elena had already considered this problem. "Thex carries it. His speed gives him the best chance of reaching the extraction point if something goes wrong." As they prepared to execute their plan, Elena felt a strange sense of calm settling over her. For 2 years, she had accepted the role of quiet observer, content to meet minimum requirements without standing out. But the war games had awakened something in her that had been dormant too long. The distraction attack began with Carnvex's thunderous war cry echoing across the courtyard. His plasma rifle blazed as he charged toward the ambush position, drawing immediate return fire from the senior cadets. Zilani supported him with precisely calculated covering fire, forcing the defenders to take cover. Elena watched from her concealed position as Thex became a blur of motion, scaling the building wall and disappearing into the overhead conduit network. The ambush force was completely focused on the frontal assault, exactly as she had predicted. But then something went wrong. A section of conduit gave way under Thex's weight, sending him crashing down into the courtyard in full view of the defenders. The Zephyrian lay motionless, either stunned or eliminated by the fall, the intelligence package scattered across the open ground between the hostile forces. Elena felt time slowing as she processed the changed tactical situation. Karnavex and Zilani were pinned down by defensive fire and couldn't reach the package. Thex was out of action. The mission was about to fail just like all the others. Without conscious thought, Elena found herself moving. She sprinted across the courtyard in a zigzag pattern, using every piece of cover and concealment the environment offered. Plasma bolts sizzled past her head as the senior cadets tried to track her movement. Her smaller size and unpredictable path made her a difficult target, but she could feel the heat of near misses warming the air around her. The intelligence package lay just meters away from the safe zone boundary. Elena dove forward, scooping up the objective as defensive fire converged on her position. Pain exploded through her left shoulder as a training bolt found its mark, but her momentum carried her across the extraction point boundary. Mission accomplished, the Academy's computer announced as Elena collapsed inside the safe zone. Team 7 has successfully completed the exercise. Elena lay on the ground, breathing heavily and trying to process what had just happened. Her shoulder throbbed where the training bolt had hit. But the pain was overshadowed by a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had experienced at the Academy. Karnavex appeared beside her, his massive form blocking out the simulated sunlight. "That was the most insane thing I have ever witnessed a being do in combat," he said, but his tone carried admiration rather than criticism. Zilani materialized on her other side, the vegan's large eyes studying Elena with scientific fascination. "Your tactical analysis throughout this exercise demonstrated capabilities that Academy records did not predict. This represents a significant data anomaly." Thex recovered enough to join them, his translation device clicking with what Elena had learned to recognize as Zephyrian laughter. Human unpredictability proves tactically advantageous. Previous assessments were incomplete. As medical personnel checked Elena's injury, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Every moment of their mission had been recorded by the Academy's monitoring systems. Her desperate sprint across the courtyard, her teammates' surprised reactions, and their successful completion of an exercise that had defeated every other team. All of it was now part of the Academy's official records. Elena Vasquez, the quiet cadet who had spent 2 years being dismissed by her peers, had just demonstrated tactical capabilities that would force the entire Academy to reconsider everything they thought they knew about human potential in combat situations. But as she watched Academy officials reviewing the recorded footage with expressions of surprise and interest, Elena realized that her days of comfortable anonymity were over. Whether she wanted it or not, the entire galactic military community was about to learn her name. Elena woke to the unfamiliar sensation of silence in the dormitory. She had expected the usual morning chaos of cadets preparing for classes, but instead found herself alone in the medical bay with only the soft hum of monitoring equipment for company. Her shoulder was immobilized in a regeneration field, the Academy's advanced medical technology already repairing the damage from yesterday's training bolt. "How are you feeling, Cadet Vasquez?" The voice belonged to Dr. Kethen, the Academy's chief medical officer. The tall, graceful being belonged to a species known for their healing abilities, his multiple arms moving with practiced efficiency as he checked her medical readings. "Better, sir. When can I return to normal duties?" Dr. Kethen's facial tendrils shifted in what Elena had learned to recognize as amusement. "Eager to get back to your classes? That's unusual for someone who just became the most talked-about cadet in Academy history." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "Sir? Perhaps you should see for yourself," the doctor said, activating a holographic display above her medical bed. "The Academy's communication networks have been experiencing unusual traffic since last night. It seems your War Games performance has attracted considerable attention." The display showed the Academy's internal message system. usually filled with routine administrative notices and class schedules. Instead, Elena saw hundreds of discussion threads, all centered around a single topic that made her heart race: human tactical capabilities. New assessment required. I don't understand, Elena said weakly. Dr. Kethen's expression became more serious. The Academy's monitoring systems recorded your entire mission, as they do for all War Games exercises. What makes your case unusual is that Academy Command decided to distribute the footage as a training example. Elena's mind reeled as she tried to process this information. Her desperate sprint across the courtyard, her tactical analysis, her team's surprised reactions to her capabilities. All of it was now being studied by cadets and instructors throughout the Academy. Distributed to whom? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. Initially, just to the Academy's Tactical Analysis Department. However, news of an unprecedented human performance in the War Games spread quickly. By this morning, the footage has been requested by over 200 faculty members and 3,000 cadets. Additionally, several Galactic Defense Force commands have asked for copies. Elena closed her eyes, trying to imagine how this revelation would affect her carefully maintained anonymity. For 2 years, she had been content to blend into the background, avoiding the attention that often brought unwanted scrutiny for humans at the Academy. There's more, Dr. Kethen continued gently. Admiral Vexthara has requested a meeting with you once you're cleared for duty. The name hit Elena like a physical blow. Admiral Vexthara was the Academy's commanding officer, a legendary Craxi warrior whose military career spanned over 4 decades. In her 2 years at the Academy, Elena had never been closer to the Admiral than the back row of a General Assembly. The idea of a personal meeting was both thrilling and terrifying. Dr. Kethen released her from the medical bay an hour later, clearing her for normal duty but recommending light physical activity for the remainder of the week. Elena made her way through the Academy's corridors with growing awareness that something fundamental had changed in how others perceived her. Conversations stopped when she passed. Cadets who had never acknowledged her existence now stared openly, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disbelief. A group of vegan students actually stepped aside to let her pass, their usual dismissive attitudes replaced by something that looked almost like respect. Elena. The voice belonged to Marcus Chen, a human cadet from her year who had rarely spoken to her before. He approached with obvious excitement, flanked by 2 other human cadets she recognized but had never interacted with. Is it true what they're saying about the War Games? Marcus asked breathlessly. That you led a mixed-species team to the only successful mission completion? Elena felt heat rising in her cheeks. It was a team effort. Everyone contributed. That's not what the footage shows, said Sarah Kim, another human cadet whose grades placed her near the top of their class. I accessed the tactical analysis this morning. Your strategic assessment was unlike anything I've seen in Academy training scenarios. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a massive Craxi cadet, Draktar, the same being who had mocked Elena in the mess hall just days earlier. But his attitude now carried none of his previous dismissiveness. Human Elena, he said, his deep voice carrying formal respect. I witnessed the footage of your combat performance. This was impressive tactical thinking. Elena stared at him, unsure how to respond. Draktar had spent 2 years treating her as beneath notice, and now he was offering what sounded like genuine admiration. Your final assault showed courage worthy of a Craxi warrior, he continued. Perhaps I underestimated human combat capabilities. As word spread through the Academy about Elena's performance, she found herself experiencing something completely alien to her previous Academy life: attention from instructors. Professor Velkan, who taught advanced strategic planning, stopped her after his morning lecture. Cadet Vasquez, I've reviewed the tactical analysis of your War Games performance, the vegan instructor said, his pale skin pulsing with intellectual excitement. Your approach to asymmetric problem-solving demonstrates cognitive patterns that our species finds fascinating. Sir, your ability to identify tactical opportunities that escaped detection by superior analytical minds suggests that human cognitive architecture may possess advantages we have not previously recognized, Professor Velkan explained. Would you be willing to participate in additional research studies? Elena nodded numbly, still struggling to process how quickly her world had changed. Professor Velkan had never shown interest in her academic performance before, and now he was requesting her participation in research studies. But the real transformation became apparent when she arrived at Colonel Chen's Advanced Weapons Systems class. Instead of taking her usual seat in the back row, Elena found that other cadets had deliberately left the front seats empty. As she approached her normal position, a Zephyrian cadet spoke up. Cadet Vasquez should sit closer to the front. The being clicked through his translation device. Her tactical insights may benefit entire class. Elena found herself guided to a seat in the second row, surrounded by cadets who had previously ignored her existence. Colonel Chen entered the classroom and immediately noticed the changed seating arrangement. I see that recent events have altered the social dynamics of this class, the colonel observed with a slight smile. Perhaps Cadet Vasquez would like to share her thoughts on yesterday's exercise. For the next hour, Elena found herself at the center of a detailed tactical discussion unlike anything she had experienced at the academy. Her analysis of the war games scenario led to broader conversations about asymmetric tactics, unconventional strategies, and the importance of challenging established assumptions in military planning. The human approach demonstrates the value of observational patience, combined with tactical creativity, a vegan cadet observed. This represents a significant departure from standard military doctrine. Colonel Chen nodded approvingly. That's precisely the point, Cadet Zarbeth. Military effectiveness often depends on the ability to think beyond conventional parameters, but it was Karnvex's presence in the classroom that truly drove home how much had changed. The massive Kraxi warrior who had been her teammate in the war games had requested permission to attend Colonel Chen's class, despite it falling outside his normal curriculum. I wish to understand human tactical thinking, he announced when Colonel Chen asked about his presence. Yesterday's experience has revealed capabilities that my species does not fully comprehend. Elena felt a surreal sense of displacement as the discussion continued. These beings had spent 2 years treating her as a liability, a weak link whose presence degraded overall team effectiveness. Now, they were studying her methods and requesting insights into human military capabilities. The transformation reached its peak when Elena received the summons she had been dreading all day. Admiral Vexthara requested her immediate presence in the Academy's command center. The command center occupied the highest levels of the Academy's central tower, offering a spectacular view of the surrounding starfield. Elena had never been inside the facility, and she found herself overwhelmed by the sophisticated equipment and the presence of senior officers from multiple species. Admiral Vexthara stood nearly 10 feet tall, her scarred hide bearing the marks of campaigns fought across the galaxy. She was a legend among the Kraxi, a warrior whose tactical brilliance had earned respect from every species in the Galactic Defense Force. Cadet Vasquez, the Admiral's voice rumbled like distant thunder. I have reviewed the complete footage of your war games performance. This represents the first successful completion of Exercise Omega 7 Inches, the scenario's 12-year operational history. Elena struggled to find her voice. I had excellent teammates, Admiral. The success was due to their skills and cooperation. Admiral Vexthara's eyes, ancient and predatory, studied Elena with uncomfortable intensity. Your teammates possessed the same skills and training they have always had. What changed was the presence of tactical thinking that approached the problem from an entirely different perspective. The Admiral activated a holographic display showing the war games footage. Elena watched herself leading her team through their unconventional approach, wincing at the memory of those terrifying moments when everything had hung in the balance. Traditional military thinking focuses on maximizing strengths and minimizing weaknesses, Admiral Vexthara continued. Your approach instead focused on exploiting opponent assumptions and creating tactical opportunities through unpredictable behavior. Elena nodded, uncertain where this conversation was leading. This footage has been transmitted to Galactic Defense Force Command for analysis, the Admiral announced. Initial assessments suggest that human tactical capabilities have been significantly underestimated in our recruitment and training protocols. The implications of this statement hit Elena like a physical blow. Her single performance in a training exercise was influencing military policy at the highest levels of the galactic government. "Admiral, I'm not sure my performance represents typical human capabilities," Elena said carefully. "I may be an outlier rather than a representative example." Admiral Vexthara's expression shifted in what Elena recognized as amusement. "That possibility has been considered, Cadet. However, preliminary analysis suggests that human cognitive architecture may be naturally suited to the type of adaptive tactical thinking you demonstrated." The Admiral gestured toward the starfield beyond the command center's windows. "The galaxy faces threats that conventional military thinking may be inadequate to address. Species like the Kraxi excel at direct confrontation. The Vegans provide superior analytical capabilities. The Zephyrians offer unmatched speed and precision." She turned back to Elena. "But humans may possess something equally valuable: the ability to approach problems from angles that other species cannot conceptualize." Also, Elena felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. The quiet anonymity she had enjoyed for 2 years was gone forever, replaced by a responsibility she had never sought. "What happens now, Admiral?" "Now, Cadet Vasquez, you help us understand what else we've been missing about human capabilities," Admiral Vexthara replied. "A new training program is being developed specifically to study and enhance human tactical abilities. You will be the primary test subject." Elena left the command center with her mind reeling. As she walked through the Academy's corridors, she noticed that the changes in how others treated her were accelerating. Conversations stopped when she passed. Cadets who had never acknowledged her existence now nodded respectfully. Even senior cadets from other species showed deference that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. The mess hall that evening was a completely different experience from any she had known at the Academy. Instead of sitting alone at her corner table, Elena found herself surrounded by cadets from multiple species, all eager to discuss tactical theory and hear her thoughts on military strategy. "Your approach to the defensive analysis was revolutionary," a vegan cadet was saying. "The mathematical models we use would never have identified those temporal vulnerabilities." Thex appeared beside their table with his characteristic sudden movement. "Human tactical thinking creates new possibilities. This has value beyond current Academy curriculum." But it was Zilani's comment that truly captured the magnitude of what had changed. "The footage has been incorporated into tactical training programs across 7 military academies," she announced. "Your performance is now considered required viewing for advanced strategic planning courses." Elena felt a mixture of pride and terror at this revelation. Somewhere in the galaxy, military cadets from dozens of species were studying her desperate sprint across a training ground, analyzing her tactical decisions, and learning from her example. As the evening progressed, Elena found herself at the center of discussions that would have been unthinkable during her first 2 years at the Academy. Species that had never shown interest in human capabilities were now requesting joint training exercises. Research proposals were being developed to study human tactical adaptability. Most significantly, the Academy's recruitment policies were being reviewed to identify and develop human candidates with similar potential. Late that night, Elena stood at her dormitory window, looking out at the starfield that surrounded the Academy. Somewhere in that vast darkness, the footage of her War Games performance was spreading through military networks, changing perceptions about human capabilities that had remained static for decades. She thought about the quiet cadet who had arrived at the Academy 2 years earlier, content to remain invisible and meet minimum requirements without attracting attention. That person seemed like a stranger now, replaced by someone who had inadvertently become a symbol of undiscovered human potential. But perhaps most importantly, Elena realized that she was no longer alone. The Academy's small human population, previously scattered and isolated, was beginning to coalesce around the new recognition of their species' tactical capabilities. Human cadets who had spent years accepting dismissive treatment were starting to demand the respect that their abilities deserved. Colonel Chen had been right during that conversation weeks earlier, when she had suggested that Elena's insights might prove useful sooner than expected. The War Games had revealed not just individual capability but the existence of tactical thinking patterns that could revolutionize military strategy across the galaxy. As Elena prepared for sleep, She reflected on how a single moment of decisive action had transformed not just her own life, but potentially the future of human participation in galactic military forces. The quiet cadet everyone dismissed had become the catalyst for a fundamental reassessment of what humanity could contribute to the defense of civilized space. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new expectations, and new opportunities to prove that her performance in the war games was not an anomaly but a glimpse of human potential that had been overlooked for far too long. The galaxy's military academies were about to discover what Elena Vasquez had always known: that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest tactical advantage of all. The footage that had started as a simple training record had become something much more significant. Proof that in a galaxy full of physically superior and intellectually advanced species, humans possessed something uniquely valuable: the ability to see solutions where others saw only problems, to find opportunity where others saw only obstacles, and to achieve victory where others saw only defeat. Elena Vasquez had spent 2 years being the quiet cadet everyone dismissed. Now she was the tactical innovator everyone wanted to understand, and the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again.